Start. 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 All right, we are live. 425, 2025. That is Auto Hoax or GTF. And stick around if you have mind aids, no mental immune system, and you catch mind viruses and you have no volition. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's what they're saying, that the public is facing an onslaught of mind viruses, which they are powerless against, and it will cause them to become violent. And we're going to have to censor the internet because a few people can't handle it. And it's the same pretext they use for locking down asymptomatic types, because you're so healthy, you're actually dangerous to the people who aren't so healthy. And we're so healthy, we're here just trafficking in dangerous mail and mis and disinformation, and we're doing just fine. I'm just fine. All right, what's up, Austin? Psyopticals. Yes, I fixed the audio. And Roxy W, thanks for joining. And let's see. So I think what it was an issue with the default settings, and I fixed it. But overall, last night we had so many interruptions that in 2+ hours, like 2 hours and 37 minutes, there was like half an hour of dead air or pauses that shouldn't have been there. And I didn't have time to go through and edit the thing. So I found this program. It's riverside.fm. It's one of these AI things you upload, and then you just subtract the dead air, and it re-exports it, cleans it up for you. And there are some podcasters who have the time, and it pays off as far as the final product, and I think it's value long term. People like John LeBon, his podcast, if you listen, he does the work. He cuts out the dead air and has a clean podcast, just no glitches, and it's nice to listen to, even if you don't agree. And I like that effect. Not that I have a lot of dead air, and I try not to, but I do have this new tool available, which makes it possible for me to salvage lost podcasts when I don't have time to do the editing. Just another way that these new tools have made my life easier. Joined by Challenger Hoax, Jamarian May. Thank you for joining. Listen to this, because I've been talking about how these various events exist on their own movie set. These are closed systems. And if you're not a crisis actor with a certain security clearance, or if you're not part of the DHS, you're just not going to be in on it. There's not a mix of real people and fake people in these events, or rather actors and regular civilians. Case in point, the Metcalf stabbing. That whole incident has involved the instigator on the right wing, Jake Lang, who was a January 6er, an insurrectionist. So you get this insurrectionist now like the face of the Austin Metcalf psyop. So the fact that they're mixing in this January 6er, obviously a Fed, a plant, a crisis actor with this event, says the whole thing is fake. Otherwise, he wouldn't be getting this kind of interaction with the family. You see, it's definitely planted. And I see a lot of this stuff. Like there's this very popular YouTuber who's always ranting. I always see him on TikTok and stuff. And he's out there ranting about Luigi Mangione, who just pled not guilty, and just cements it. Whenever you see these agents, these influencers who are clearly puppeteered, and they're given a role in one of these bigger psyops, it just reinforces how fake it is. Challenger Hoax says, I made a new video comparing the voice of Christina McAuliffe and the lawyer professor Sharon. Okay, good. A lot of people have gone through the twins, and I'm glad you brought this up, because the Challenger Hoax has a lot of interesting twin stuff. You know, a bunch of twinsies. And we've been talking about twins as of late. Right now, those Sync twins are viral. These are the eyewitnesses to a carjacking, and a pair of twins. They have a facility where they take care of birds, some kind of sanctuary, but they speak in sync with one another. And then we had the twins, in quotes, you know, kind of like basically, where you had the head of the papacy and the head of the WEF, the World Economic Forum, both exiting world stage, same age, same day, and they kind of look alike as far as archetypes go. So what is that? And then I went to go see Sinners under the presupposition that it would contain messaging, propaganda messaging relevant to the real-time race war psyop involving, of course, the stabbing at the track meet. And interestingly enough, the movie features an actor who plays his own twin, and he dies bleeding in his arms. And that's one of the main things about the story of the track meet, where one of the twins dies bleeding in the other's arms. So there's an overlap. And then you tie in the racial element because the whole movie has a subtext of vampire Klansmen. So you put this together, it kind of reinforces the idea that the Austin Metcalf, Hunter Metcalf are the same person, that the whole thing is fake. And it's really easy to do with twinsies, as evidenced by the Challenger hoax. So if you want to post a link to your channel, Challenger hoax, I will make sure that it goes into the show notes. Estevan, thanks for joining. Late night IPS fills me with joy and splendor. Yeah, I try to get in here by 6, but I'm doing a lot of other work on the side, and sometimes I can't make it in on time, but it's going to pay off. I'm going back through all my writings and blogs, and I'm trying to compile something more authoritative than Auto Hoaxology 101. I want to take it to the next level and have a section on Metascript, concurrent programming, and then a bunch of examples, not just the theory, but how we've applied this model to media over the last couple of years since the book came out, and just show how it adds up. Because I'm not the one making predictions. The media is. I'm calling them out. It's like, hey, you guys are all prophets. Somehow you're able to coordinate the releases with these major productions with fake events. And we've arrived at a pretty good explanation for how this all works. I think we've reverse engineered it. Challenger Hoax says there was no twins. That's the misinfo part. It's spread by people like Jeranism. Okay, well, I'd like to hear your take if you want to contact or call in. The numbers below, and anything said by that shape trader Curvert is questionable. I mean, he did fake an ISS transit, and sure, maybe it's a ball, don't care. But he didn't see the curve on the Kate Perry launch. And Kate Perry's getting a lot of hate on her performance, which I don't think is deserved. Like, people who never watch her, would never go to one of her concerts, and now suddenly criticizing her every move, like literally every dance move. And I don't know why, except that maybe calling out this thing as fake was done specifically to bring up the DEI thing on the right and then trigger a counter response on the left. And it's kind of interesting how it's playing out. I think it might have been intentional. We've had this conversation before, like, are they really that bad, or are they putting out truther bait, trying to get people to take stances so they can shut down criticism? So now if you say, hey, that rocket launch looks fake, you're being a sexist. And they can say that now. Jamarian May says, don't you think they do a lot of these psyops to get people emotionally stirred up so they can harvest that negative emotional energy? 100%. 100%. In fact, I would describe the mass media as a psychological abuser and a liar. If you look at it in its as a singular monolithic entity, it's a liar. Big Brother is a narcissist. And one of the things that they're known for, people with these really extreme personalities, is triggering people, because in some way, like emotional vampires, they feast off it. Now, I don't know if there's some kind of energetic exchange. Wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me if these little black screens were just absorbing and were feeding some kind of, I mean, who knows? What's up, Marcel Ploger? Thanks for joining from the Netherlands. I hope this time slot's good for everyone on Fridays. These are a very busy day here. And simple things, just doing laundry just pushes everything back. This place that I'm at is supposedly the city's the 9th most dangerous city in the country. I don't see it. I just see nothing but endless growth and expansion, and it's crazy that the street behind my house that I used to be able to cross is now like the freeway. I think they exaggerate things on the news to make people paranoid and angry, but the real conspiracy is that things aren't as bad as they say. And one of the things that we've noted from the very beginning is that when you call out how good things are or how not bad they are, people get mad. Like, what do you mean that wasn't a real mass murder? Like, ordinarily, that would be good news. But they're like, no. No, in my mind, all those kids were slaughtered. How dare you challenge that? It's like, sure, if you want to live in a worldview that's just been painted up with theatrical blood, go for it. So Harvey Weinstein. So to get back to what I was saying about overlapping characters, Luigi Mangione is sharing a cell with P. Diddy, R. Kelly, the Prophet of Doom, Frank James, who shot 33 rounds into the subway, just like the Riddler. He wore a mask. He was online. He radicalized people. He was against the mayor. We've been talking about these various entities and how they all tend to overlap when it comes to like the jail. Like they're all sharing a cell. I think even, I believe Sam Bankman-Fried is there as well. But Harvey Weinstein is behind bars still. And it says here, on the eve of his New York retrial, the fallen mogul spends 23 hours a day alone in his cell, reading biographies compulsively, calling his prison consultant, who also looks out for Luigi Mangione. So Luigi and Weinstein sharing a common prison consultant is kind of a pattern. We've also noted that the same coroner does autopsies for all these high-profile psyops, and we're talking like the guy who did, I think George Floyd's also did. I'll have to go back and go through the list. Maybe he even did. What was it? Maybe it wasn't JFK, but I have to check. I'll go through it, but we have to go through metascriptors, but also actors or various persons who appear in certain capacities in multiple obviously fake events. So that's something to pursue. These prison consultants to these celebrity crisis actors, and of course the coroners. Yeah, Wayne Carver. It wasn't Wayne Carver, although Wayne Carver was one of the most hilarious names out there. Wayne Carver, of course, is you'd call him a morphology tech or coroner, I guess the medical examiner who does the big carving. We carve the big Y into someone's torso and chest, and then you open them up like a can. It's really grotesque if you've ever seen it. And one thing I can say for sure, and I really don't entertain the anti-V crowd, the anti-pokey. I don't even like to say it. The needle phobes. But one of their big talking points was about blood clots. People suddenly dying and they got blood clots in the bodies, and the morgues are reporting it. And that's not true. Because if you suddenly die, you're going to be autopsied, which means that they cut all your arteries and they can't embalm you in the same way. They still do, but it's these multiple injections where clots aren't even really a part of the process. But with the single point injection, clots are a regular part of the process. So it's kind of a giveaway that these people are all lying. Stu Peters did a documentary about it. And if you trust Stu Peters, I mean, I don't know what to say. That guy's an obvious fed and provocateur. I wish he'd go back to his rap identity. It's amazing how many of these provocateurs and influencers were actors or rappers. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, Jamarian May says it's like how you have all these dentists to the stars or plastic surgeons to the stars. Well, this one, his name, I think I know it. Coroner for George Floyd. And we'll see if we can get a list of all the famous bodies that he did. Okay, here we go. The coroner who did the one for George Floyd. Oh, that's right, because he also did the one for Epstein. That's why it stood out to me. Now, I want to make sure I got his name right, but the same guy who examined the dead body of Epstein, and I think they might have exhumed one of these cop killings. Is it Dr. Andrew Baker? I believe it's Baker. Anyway, we'll go into that, but I'm just pointing out that we have to look down these different trails as I build up the wiki. All right, Challenger hoax. Let's bring him on.
What's up, dude?
What's up, Hey, how you doing?
All right. So you don't know that there's no twins? They just like these videos that I don't know who first put out these YouTube videos, but they said that there was two twins when officially there's no twins. They never said they were twins ever. That's just like misdirection, you know?
Really? That's
Yeah.
new to me. That's new to me.
Because the McNairs, the black guys, are 10 months apart, and Onizukas are 2 years apart officially. It's in their NASA bios, everything. And
See,
like
this is okay. That's
a
a
lot of
pattern that
these
isn't
shill people, these shill agents, whatever network, they put out the bad info. They never even check the info. They never even, you know what I mean? And it's just
fascinating.
spread. Yeah.
I think you're onto something here because I call it truther bait. Like the big channels are the ones saying you can tell Kate Perry's rocket launch was fake because there's a dummy hand. And I'm like, how are these channels with 1 million followers putting together these memes and promoting this information that's then debunked a couple hours later? We're like, well, no, that's from a 2017 launch. This is a pattern. I call it truther bait. So the twins on the Challenger, truther bait. Never even considered that.
Yeah. And it's just spread. It's spread on every platform: TikTok, YouTube, whatever, Instagram.
Fascinating. I mean, I've done my part to spread a lot of misinformation, as I have. But when I find these things are wrong, I'm like, well, does it subtract from the big picture? And generally, it does not. But
Yeah.
it's like with the moon landing. There are so many things like, oh, they didn't walk on the moon because the footprints don't match. Well, it's because they use boot covers. And so they give you this false lead and then they debunk you. So we have to be realizing this tells you something too, though. It tells you that they are faking this stuff because they have to devise these ways to throw people off who notice. If they weren't faking it, they wouldn't be putting out fake information to mislead the people who don't believe it. They wouldn't be gaming us like that.
Did you ever see the video? The guy, he went to the professor's house and caught him in his garage, and it was just like snow was out. Did you ever see that video?
I did.
With the guy?
I did.
What do
I
you
followed
think
up on
about
that.
that? It was like pretty coincidental that he was out there. The guy just pulls up like. What do you think about that?
I remember. So this guy was promoted by David Weiss, which is questionable in and of itself. And he goes out and he just drives up to this astronaut's house and they're like, hey, I got this YouTube channel. Are you this guy in the Challenger? And the man said that he gets these calls all the time. He gets emails all the time, and he's called the FBI over it.
Yeah. Threatening, low key.
Yeah. Well, I still think the Challenger explosion has all the elements of a hoax. But the fact is, if your only evidence is something that they can just easily debunk and make you look crazy, then it's a setup.
Yeah, that's all the conspiracy industrial complex, they're all fucking they put in that little bit of information that can refute your whole video.
That's a great way of putting it. And that's the reason why I have been stating for the last couple of years that our channel is actually separate from Trutherville. I defined it as Trutherville because that is the conspiracy entertainment complex where they're manufacturing alternative narratives and discrediting narratives. But yeah, it's such a rigged game.
Yeah, I just look at stuff. I don't know, man. I don't know what's real or fake. So I could be totally wrong. I don't have an identity connected to the shit that I look at, I'm not a flat earth.
Right. That is a problem where people have they attach themselves to something and then they can't change when better information comes. And that hasn't been my take on this, but one of my things is we may not know how they fake something in its entirety, even though we can rule in that it's probably faked. Have you looked into the weird symbolism with other, for example, the timing of the Challenger explosion, the same date, 19 years after Apollo 1, or it's 1 minute, 13 seconds. Columbia was the 113th launch. It explodes. Have you looked at any of that kind of stuff connecting the different hoaxes?
No, I don't really know like gematria and all that, but it's interesting. Like I think it exploded 94 seconds or something like after launch. That's supposed to mean something, or
It was it was a minute. Well, it was a minute and 13 seconds, so 73 seconds. And I think that William Cooper had discerned a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's almost not super relevant. I like to focus on the movie magic, the special effects. To me, that's the elephant in the room that nobody talks about. A lot of the other stuff could just be distraction, intentionally put there fog of Psywar.
Yeah. Yeah, like this video I found, it's of the lawyer, and I don't know. I don't know that it proves anything. I just showed a comparison, and like it seems like when she's talking, it's like her accent goes back to her like New Hampshire accent for like a second, but it's nothing conclusive, you know. It's just something to look at.
Right. Now, you mentioned Jeranism because he recently went to Antarctica and observed the 24-hour sun. Do you think that this was part of his plan, his script when he first got into the topic like 8 years ago or something? 10 years ago?
Um, I don't know if it was planned that far, and there's always a way out, right? Probably for these agents or whatever. I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, Witsit Gets It was a kind of a latecomer to this whole thing, and he was chosen to go. I volunteered while they were all rejecting, and they wouldn't go with me. I didn't know why, but they're all questionable. And the whole crew that went, I'm not doubting that they went somewhere that they went. I'm not saying they did it in the Vegas sphere, but I'm saying that debunking a model that they promoted is not really a progress or a win. If anything, they just destroyed a straw man that nobody really believed in, except for a small minority of people that they were hyping up.
Yeah, I feel like these channels are like super astroturfed, man. I find it hard to believe that people have been following them for years, like these thousands of people. I don't believe it. And I don't give a fuck what they do. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah,
don't
you know
speak
what?
for me.
Okay, this is something we observed too. Out of the woodworks, after not talking for years, we saw a number of these people that had just been a part of the whole flat earth thing. They disappeared and they came back right before this Antarctica thing. And all of them were gone for a few years. And where were they?
Or like the Morgile.
Yeah, exactly. Like him. And then you had Robbie Davison, Paul on the Plane, Patricia Steer. They're all out all of a sudden. But then where were they for the last few years? Well, they were all promoting some crypto rug pull scam called Axion. I'm like, wait, how did they all go together? They all joined Flat Earth, they all joined crypto, then they all joined Flat Earth, and then they all publicly denounce Flat Earth and go back to the ball. I'm like, okay, they all have the same puppeteer.
Well, InfoWars, it's also owned, or Genesis Communication Networks, that also owns Midas Metal something trading and shit. You're aware of that, right?
I've heard all the ads. I mean, I tend to drown them out, but I have heard, yes, that ultimately you can kind of trace it. And yeah, none of us.
InfoWars is owned by GCN, and GCN owns Midas something gold trading. That's why they're always promoting crypto and gold. It's part of the
Okay, well,
complex.
I don't believe that they actually need that money from the products they promote in order to run. I think they heavily promote their products to be obnoxious and drive people back to the mainstream, but two, as a cover because they're funded by the Pentagon or something.
Yeah.
Alex Jones did not make millions off of super male vitality, and they need to provide a cover for all the money that he's given from, we the taxpayers, or whoever funds the psyops and the actors.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you go back far enough, like the mid '90s, Alex Jones was promoting all the militia shit, and then when Oklahoma City happened, they were trying to pass that omnibus, that fucking crime bill or whatever, that later became the Patriot Act or something like that. So they've always been working hand in hand. To me, it seems like the government and these conspiracy people.
You're right, because you're right. Alex Jones got radicalized at Waco. He helped the Branch Davidians build back the temple after Dave Koresh was incinerated by the ATF, and Timothy McVeigh also got radicalized there. And then he, as on an anniversary date, did the Oklahoma City thing. So Jones has been right there at the center of the genesis of white nationalist movements led by feds since then.
Yeah.
So they've always been connected.
Yeah.
Well, hey, if you want to promote your channel or put a link in there, I'm trying to get all the channels that are on the same page as us. I have this new site, autohoax.com, and I just get your YouTube channel, the RSS feed, and I plug it in. So it's like the Drudge Report for hoaxes. The hoax report is what I call it.
I put a link in the chat. I don't know, like
That's all
where
you need
should
to
I?
do. Yeah, just drop it in the
All right.
chat. I'll get it from there and I'll bookmark it. But yeah, I appreciate the call and the information. I'm going to have to take a closer look at
All
the
right.
Challenger disaster now and kind of reassess everything that we've been
Check out
given.
my videos. I only have a few, man. I only try to make decent don't my live videos suck, but the regular videos, man, pretty good.
Okay. Okay, then I'll put them here as a reference so everyone who's listening can check them out. Thanks for the call and the information. That's good to know.
All right, dude. Peace.
Yep. All right. That was the Challenger hoax. And look, this is actually good to know. Are we walking around with self-discrediting talking points or examples of evidence of hoaxery without even knowing it? And it's good to know because we saw this on full display with the Kate Perry thing, where big channels, bigger than any conspiracy channels, we're talking like Valuetainment, James Woods, the actor, and many big channels are just openly saying it was fake. You saw the dummy hand, or you saw the door. Wiz Khalifa called out the door. So you have big names calling out this thing as fake, but the evidence they're giving is not evidence. It's been explained away, and this is routine. And instead of calling out the more obvious stuff, like we don't have a video of Kate Perry singing "It's a Wonderful World." Gayle King said she did it. She said she did it. It's been reported multiple times. We don't have audio of it. Why? Because they couldn't possibly record it if they're not really floating because they're doing jump cuts. The way they're faking it doesn't lend itself to simulating levitation. And by the way, I watched some clips of her live performances, and she is adept at hanging from harnesses and flipping, floating in the air. Like she is an astronaut in every sense of the word. If being an astronaut is defined as someone who fakes going to space, they LARP it. But her acrobatics are far superior to anything that you saw from Butch or Suni up there for their 9 months. So Kate Perry should go to the ISS. She's trained. I think Tom Cruise is going to the ISS soon too, I hope. I mean, how much longer do we have before they pull it? They're going to WTC7 the ISS, and they're going to pay Elon Musk $840 million to do it. Commenter says, Tavistock Institute shaped the destinies of Germany, Britain, and the United States in a very controversial way. The people of these nations did not know they were being brainwashed. Well, it didn't just start with these different groups. The brainwashing has gone on from the beginning of recorded history, and who knows? I kind of think it just changed hands. Media is the world state church. It supplanted religion. But I'm not sure if it's something that just started. I mean, maybe we just noticed. Although I'm not I'm not a reality denialist. I was looking at various videos of war crimes today, pictures of stuff, just various things, just wondering, well, where does it begin? When did real conflict and war move into war, mind war? Did they transition us into a simulation over the last 100 years as a way of, I don't know, the most humane way to manage these massive populations? I mean, I'm not sure, but the recent history that we're looking at is just a record of fakery. How far back does it go? Now, this is an interesting post. I saw this on Twitter. This kind of goes along with what the last caller was talking about. Canary in the Coal Mine tweeted this. Did you know that Witsit Gets It, Stu Peters, and General Flynn all live? Oh, listen to this. This is interesting. So this is just showing some addresses of all these various shills or alleged shills. And I'm not saying they're shills. How would I know? Well, you can use logic and reason. If somebody goes to space, they are faking space, unless you're going to argue that it's real. So you could say pretty confidently that Kate Perry is a space faker and she's part of that hoax. She knows. She's in the know. She couldn't possibly not be in the know at this point. When it comes to other conspiracies, it's pretty easy to tell who's aware and who isn't aware that it's fake, who's an insider. Like, for example, I think we can rule out the possibility that Laura Loomer thinks Trump was actually shot. She's an insider to that hoax, the Butler hoax, and whatever's coming next. Just pointing it out that it's interesting to note here, because we saw this in other places. I think the QAnon shaman lived down the street from Ray Epps. I mean, think about that. Ray Epps, the Fox News line was, well, the MAGA people were peaceful, and then Ray Epps, a Fed, told them to go inside. So it was provoked, which doesn't exonerate them. It's just such a weak response. But yeah, he lived next to Jake and Jelly. Jake, who was a Chansley, I think his name was, who was an actor, a voice actor, a performance artist, and then he dresses up in his roadkill costume, grabs a spear, and runs into the Capitol. It doesn't get shot. I'm sorry, but if you get a spear and you run into these places, they would shoot you. But somehow he got a pass. Deprogram says, did Laura ever respond to her friend that was here on the show? She did respond. So we're talking about this movie, The Madness, which was the #1 show at the time I watched it, and we're living in it. If you've been following this Life Follows Netflix thing, as we have. And part of the story is that a corresponding character to, quote, real life Laura Loomer is this Lauren Jennings, who exposes this tech billionaire's influence on stealing an election. And when she tries to expose it, he has her killed. And I've been following the story because even like less than 2 weeks ago, Laura Loomer called out Jack Dorsey for stealing 2020. And then she said she's been getting death threats from NSA people who are mad about her getting certain individuals fired. But my point being, she has been walking steadily into the role of Laura Jennings. And Laura Jennings in this Netflix show gets killed by this tech billionaire surreptitiously with some kind of a nerve agent. And after I talked about this movie and how it relates to certain real world characters, from Don Lemon, who's Munchie, to the tech billionaire relating to Musk, other critics and reviewers noticed it. So I'm not making this up. These are intentional connections. These are characters that are corresponding to real life people. And so you could call it propaganda. You could say it's just writers taking inspiration from real life. Sure. But then we have to explain how these writers are also prophetic. So I made the point to say that if Life Follows Netflix, Laura Loomer is going to be shuffled off the world stage at some point, and there's going to be a conspiracy about it, maybe like the next Seth Rich, but that seems to be on the program. Well, somebody who knows her or knows somebody that knows her wanted to relay this to her, that she has a corresponding character in, and I don't imagine she would give us any kind of response, simply because if what we're talking about here is an actor in a psychological operation, an influence operation, of course they're not going to comment on this stuff. But her response was to no longer accept direct messages from me. I had been flooding her inbox for a couple of years now about Marcus Goldfinch, the White House press corps QAnon influencer that nobody's ever reported on, and she's repeatedly ignored me. And I like to send these messages to people just to see who's in the know and who's not going to share it, who's not going to break the story. So she's always breaking stories, but she's not going to bring up this one that is very relevant to, I think, anybody in the alt media. But so that being said, yeah, her response was to block me. Deprogrammed Truther says, I wonder, after Laura Loomer gets fake killed, who will she come back as? Right. Interesting question. Thank you, Marcel. Gifted 5 memberships. I got to share that picture of the framed penguin art. Side note. Let me see here. If you want to call in, I do have a link. So just it's right there. It says caller guests, StreamYard.com/. I'll see if I can get a permanent link for that. Commenter says Moloch is the original Hebrew text in the Bible, as a Canaanite god associated with the sacrifice of children. I've heard that before. I'm interested in the connections between Moloch and Saturn. And this, when you look at the syncretism involved in the rituals that we see on the world stage, you can see that there's a fascinating kind of a lineage, but the symbolism is interesting to me. It's more than just window dressing and distraction. I think it's actually fundamental. If you think about, like, hypothetically, we have souls. Let's just assume for a minute that's true. Then it might make sense that the mass media mind control operation is just one level of a control system that might even have what you would describe as a spiritual dimension. And it could very well be that we're seeing the trappings of this other level to it. All right, let's continue. Going through my minds.com. So yes, Luigi is going to be, I'm not sure if they're going to let him go. Now, when he first came out, when Luigi first stepped onto the world stage, I said, Robin Hood, the Green Hood, class warfare, rob from the rich, give to the poor, hero of the people, an outlaw. I said all these things, and it was based on the imagery, day one. And this has been consistent. He has embodied this. Marxist class warrior, Robin Hood, fighting the elite. Well, here's Steve Bannon says, Luigi Mangione has been treated like a hero. This should scare you to the marrow of your bones, because that's the alternate if the system keeps going like it is. And then he goes on to say that Luigi is Robin Hood. Here it is. He compares Luigi to Robin Hood. I'll play that clip here in a minute. I want to go through my other things that are worthy of note here. Robert Cremo. Free Robert Cremo. I don't see the free Luigi people calling for this guy to be freed. Robert Cremo gets life sentence for the deadly shooting 2022 July 4th parade. This story is very relevant to our interests. It connects to a lot of things. I would most notably point out he has the 47 tattooed on the side of his head, right where Trump does, or where Trump has the 47 on his hat. And this was back when Trump just had the 45 on the side of his head. And by the way, Trump sells shot glasses at his Trump Tower whiskey bar. We're talking a teetotaler, a guy who doesn't drink, He's against drinking and smoking, but he's got a bar. And he sells these shot glasses that have a signature on them and a 45, like a bullet shooting into it. Like, what is that? And I saw that, and I noticed his hat, and he had the 45 on the side of it. And I said, look, this is a foreshadowing of his head wound. And I connected this to a few things. But at the time, I was just noting, yes, the 4.5 is the point where they're going to shoot. It alludes to Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket and Joker, who's a reference to JFK, who has the target on the side of his head. So out comes Robert Cremo with a 47 tattooed right there. And he shoots up a 4th of July parade. So 4, 7th month, 4-7 or 7-4. And his mom is photographed holding bags from Target. I'm like, whenever a psyop happens, I look at the first photos they blast out there. So I'm connecting these things. I'm like, wait, a sniper on the roof, 47. He's known for attending Trump rallies, which is weird, dressed up like Waldo from Where's Waldo. So he goes to Trump rallies, and he's got a printed out news clipping of Lee Harvey Oswald on his wall. So he idolizes Oswald. He goes to Trump rallies dressed like Waldo, and then he becomes a sniper. And his mom has the target thing, and he snipes this 4th of July, 4-7. So it's all kind of tied together. And at this time, I said, look, the Highland Park shooter, and at the same time that this was happening, the Parkland High shooter, Nick Cruz, was getting his sentencing. I said the Highland Park shooter, and I connected this to Parkland. Parkland Hospital is actually where JFK was pronounced dead. But I said, look, Lee Harvey Oswald has just entered the world stage. And since then, we've seen the buildup of references to Lee Harvey Oswald and the buildup towards the eventual Butler, Pennsylvania shooting of Trump on that side of his head. Although at that time it was 4.5 and 4.7, which kind of gives you a covert 9/11. But we had started talking about Trump getting shot right there 2 years before it happened based on this character. And this goes deeper because of this character's correlation with a character in Stranger Things. And Stranger Things has a number of layered connections with school shootings, school shooters, including Audrey Hale, and even going into their season finale, where Matthew Modine, the guy who played Joker in Full Metal Jacket, gets shot at the season finale. Fascinating connections when you mind map it out, which we're doing. See, what we're doing here isn't speculating or conspiracy theory. We're just documenting what is, and the seeming prophetic nature of the media to predict the future with regularity, which of course happens, but not because they're psychic. Commenter says, Moloch is depicted in John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost as one of the greatest warriors of the rebel angels, vengeful and militant. I'm going to have to give that book another try. You know, I try to read it right after I read Dante's Inferno, or rather the Divine Comedy. And the Divine Comedy is probably a must read, at least the first two books. I don't know about the Paradise. I like the first two a lot, but there's some interesting facets. Like I was reading part of it where Ninth Circle, you know, is it the bottom of hell where it's a frozen lake kept cold by Satan flapping his wings, and in his mouth he's eternally chewing on Judas and the betrayers of Julius Caesar. So the betrayers of Christ and the betrayers of Caesar are being gnawed upon by the devil for eternity. And I think, why would they correlate Jesus Christ with Julius Caesar? That's kind of an interesting connection there. Worth exploring. All right, let's move on. We're just going through my minds.com first, and then we'll catch up. So Jessica Ross 597206. This is a chemtrailer. I block chemtrails on my feeds, and somehow they're getting back into my feeds. They're saying different things, but it's getting into my feeds. I block chemtrails. She tweets this picture of the sky with some cirrus clouds, and she says, I'm sitting in a parking lot waiting for my babies to come out of school. Parents, we cannot allow this. Your children rely on you for safety. They need clean air and sunshine and blue skies. It's their God-given right not to be poisoned. My response to her, because chemtrails are a figment of the imaginations of people who haven't looked into the science behind persistent condensation trails. It's a persistent conspiracy theory, but it's baseless, and it's rooted in arguments from ignorance and something of an appeal to motive fallacy. It's a great study in fallacious reasoning, but they don't exist. That's just the bottom line, and it's provable. But I said to her, I hope you're not terrifying your children with your paranoid ranting about harmless clouds. If so, then you're a child abuser, because there are no such thing as chemtrails. And I think that's true. If you tell your children to be afraid of clouds, yeah, that's kind of messed up. I mean, you're trying to train them to be agoraphobic? And her response to me was, go F yourself. And then she gave me a heart emoji. And then Kate Ayer said, why do you follow her? She's working hard to end this. It's happening more frequently. So they do feel like they're fighting a cause, which I guess is okay. Their hearts are in the right place. Okay, so here's Steve Bannon, and he says, this is where he's talking about how they're treating Luigi like Robin Hood.
And what the Harvard and the colleges and the law firms show you, it's all federal money. The reason Paul Weiss cratered was because of the federal money. You're going to lose your security clearance. You're not going to be able to work for jobs. By the way, there's one line in there. No client of yours is going to be eligible for federal funds. The same thing with Harvard.
We don't want to listen to Steve Bannon very much, but bringing up that Luigi's been treated like a hero is what I'm noting, and the reference to Robin Hood. I think these are significant because they build up this character, and it's all been framed this way, this class warfare thing. It ties into all these other psyops very neatly. Even we were talking about the Branch Davidian, the Waco. So Waco, we're talking about Waco, Alex Jones, and the Timothy McVeigh connections to all of this stuff. But on the anniversary of Waco, Trump was on trial when Maxwell Azarello set himself on fire. That's the anniversary of Dave Koresh being incinerated. But Maxwell had a very Luigi-esque manifesto, which was basically, we need to stop capitalism, stop corporations. We need to fight the rich. It's rich versus poor. It's not left versus right. Same messaging. And again, Trump kicked off his 2024 campaign in Waco, which is not a coincidence. You know, he's kicking off his presidential campaign in Waco the day after Netflix releases Waco American Apocalypse. No coincidences. Breaking, U.S. Representative George Santos gets 7 years in prison for fraud. This guy lied his way to the top, but yes, he's going to prison for fraud. This is the guy who said that his grandparents died in the Holocaust. His parents died on 9/11. He said he died in Sandy Hook, and nobody questioned it. He just attached himself to all these different psyops. I don't know if he went too far and they're really prosecuting him, or if this is all just theater. I mean, it's an interesting question. I think this guy's genuinely a psychopath. I saw his Cameo account. Jamarian May says, invasion from Mars happened before and will happen again. Now, when you say Mars, what do you mean? Because I think you might be right. Mars could be a few things. It could be deep underground bases of brainwashed populations, like the vaults in Fallout. Because remember, I think it was David Knight on InfoWars had said that, you know, this guy was CIA. He said, yeah, they're sending children to Mars, 27 million miles away to be slaves. And it's been going on for decades. The secret space program. And everybody laughed, but NASA said it's not true. But I thought, why would NASA even bring this up? But I thought it could be true that they are trafficking children, but not to Mars, but to some underground military base they call Mars. And they could be raising an entire generations of Martians who are hostile to humans. Well, Earthlings. Or who knows what. I'm not exactly sure, but when you say, you know, Mars, I mean, I also think you can correlate this with the age of Horus, the New Age movement. The whole New Age concept is that the sun god, Christ, Osiris, the sacrificial sun god motif theme is going away. And they're replacing it with this androgen represented by the Egyptian god Horus, the falcon-headed god, which also correlates to SpaceX and the Falcon 9 rockets. It's all symbolism, and it's all about the new age of Mars. So in that sense, yes, we are being invaded by Martians. And the red planet, the idea of the space communism is as old as the space program. And I'm not anti-commie. I'm not an Ayn Randian capitalist. The system's rigged. It doesn't even make sense to take sides. Okay, moving on. 33 Hoax says, have you seen the ninth circle at the end sets himself on fire to talk to Satan? Have not. Actually, I have seen it. You're talking about the Johnny Depp film. And Johnny, that was directed by Roman Polanski. No, that's Ninth Gate. But I think you're talking about Ninth Gate. And Roman Polanski, of course, directed Rosemary's Baby, about this satanic cult and the husband's involved and the devil impregnates his wife while she's drugged. And then the director, Polanski, is known for what? Quaaludes, you know, which they use to drug people. There's some connections there because his wife is the pregnant Sharon Tate who gets killed by the Satanist from the Manson cult. Susan Atkins was a satanic witch who performed rituals at the Church of Satan, and she's the one who killed the pregnant Sharon Tate. Wife of Roman Polanski, again, who directed Rosemary's Baby. Fascinating connections there. Jermaine May says, when do you think you'll release the IPS members only jackets? You know, I've been wanting to do some kind of, I guess, like a windbreaker that for press. And I just need to design something. If anybody wants to submit designs or ideas, because I'm not really a clothing designer. Maybe I should hire somebody. But I certainly have the stores now, as far as like print on demand, and in fact, I've been selling stuff on eBay, not art. I haven't been putting my time into selling art because it's not really paying off. And I've moved into print on demand and kind of expanding. I try to tap into, can I sell stuff to Luigi fans? I was trying to find a supplier for Green Berets. I don't want to sell Super Mario stuff. I'm not trying to, get involved with copyright stuff, but I'm just trying to see, can I be a Cywar profiteer? And I'm fine with doing so. I mean, why shouldn't I be? We are playing a rigged game. We should take advantage of the fact that people are throwing their money into it. And if you look at these crazy lefties, the ones who scratch Cybertrucks, where would you rather have them investing their money? Where better to spend it than at the IPS? So I put out some hats. There's these hats that are very popular now. It's a mockery of MAGA, and it's Make America Go Away. And who would wear that? I don't know. But I've already sold 2. The Illuminati confirmed t-shirts are selling pretty well. I think 3 people have picked those up. Challenger Hoax says, have you ever looked into the walrus bones on Mars? The NASA images of walrus bones baffling. Oh, what island is that from? I've seen a lot of stuff on Mars. Squirrels. We've seen flies. In fact, Donnie Darko's director, the director of that film, his father worked on the Viking mission, Mars rover. Mars has got to be the easiest thing to fake because it's just this rover. As far as where it's being done, yeah, I'm sure that they have certain locations, but at this point, now it's all CGI. Like, they've gone past the point of we're going to catch them with a glitch, where you're going to see a beer can on Mars. Those days are gone. And I remember being very interested in stuff like pyramids on Mars, the monolith on the moon of Mars. I found that stuff to be super intriguing. And then I realized that's a trap. Because if they can get you to discuss pyramids on Mars, you've taken it for granted that we've been to Mars, that we have satellites orbiting Mars. So you're going along with the program quite a lot just to entertain. Is there a Mars pyramid? And I think that's all by design. There was this one episode of a Rush Limbaugh show I recall hearing where he was talking about how they found water on Mars, and he accused NASA of lying. Not because it's fake, but because the environmentalists have this huge slush fund and they're using this space utopianism to justify getting a bunch of, money. Plus, they can throw in this narrative. In fact, you can find it. I think it was an April Fool's Day prank, but Limbaugh gave this strange, 3-minute rant about how the Martians had destroyed their environment and they came to Earth. Have you heard that one? It might be worth playing. Do I think Rush Limbaugh is Jim Morrison? I don't know. No, he was, 33 years with the EIB. Rush Limbaugh pans evidence of water on Mars as part of a liberal agenda. That's just part of the liberal agenda, Rush Limbaugh says. Yeah, I thought that was funny. This college dropout, Rush Limbaugh, thinks all scientists are flaming liars or liberals and trying to undermine. Yeah, that's funny. Limbaugh, NASA scientists claim that climate change destroyed an ocean on Mars, and it's that's kind of what I'm getting to here. Anyway, back to my mines. Yeah, I saw the WEF has a new pope. What about the Vatican? Why couldn't Klaus Schwab go take over Pope Francis's job? I mean, what's the difference between the World Economic Forum and the Vatican overall? Isn't it kind of the same thing? I kind of see the WEF as the Vatican for atheists. The whole thing is creating God constructs, climate change eschatology, AI is some kind of collective consciousness. They mystify this stuff. Not a coincidence. The WEF's AI agenda is called Gaia. I mean, think about that. The Global AI Alliance, Gaia is the name of the Earth God. So I think Klaus Schwab should take over at the Vatican. Oh, nice one there. Challenger Hoax says here, the face on Mars and pyramid were spread by ex-NASA Richard Hoagland and ex-Air Force Art Bell. Well, Art Bell and Whitney Strieber, who wrote Communion about alien abductions, they wrote the first book on climate change, like the first climate fiction. It was called The Coming Superstorm. Now, this is all interesting to think about now, kind of in retrospect, when you look at Art Bell and these alternative conspiracy types and their role in promulgating a lot of NASA mythology or alien mythology to a certain audience. It's kind of interesting now that I think about it. I'll have to go back and look, but and I bring up Whitney Strieber in particular because there's a documentary called Mirageman about how the Air Force special agents created the stories of alien abductions and fed this stuff to conspiracy theorists on purpose to discredit them as eyewitnesses. Should they see, like in particular, down the street, there's Kirtland Air Force Base. And Mirageman is about a conspiracy theorist who used to watch this Air Force base and discuss what he saw, claiming he saw experimental craft. So in order to discredit him, since they can't just put him in a van and take him away somewhere, they gave him a bunch of stories about aliens, probing people, abducting people. And then he started these conferences, and then other people would agree they experienced the same thing. And that's how the UFO cults were born. It's an Air Force hoax and always has been. All these people are questionable. Now, the whole point of Mirageman is that after years of lying to this individual, they told him, hey, we were just honeypotting all of these conferences, finding out who knew what, and aliens don't exist. And the guy couldn't believe it. He said, no, you're lying to me. Like, you're actually lying to me because I don't know. He couldn't back out of this new belief system. But Whitney Strieber, who co-wrote that book with Art Bell, promoted the idea that he was abducted by aliens and probed. So the whole idea of aliens interbreeding with humans, I think, is a repeat of the story of the Watchers mating with the daughters of man. It's again, aliens are angels for the atheists. Sometimes they're judgy and they wreck everything. Sometimes they're saviors and they beam up and rapture the believers. Other times they're secretive and they're doing weird experiments and the probings. But it's all mythology. Marcel says, is CERN nothing more than an escape option for the evil bloodlines trying to escape judgment going back in time? You know, I don't often talk about, I try not to spend too much time dwelling on, well, my synchronicities, these strange coincidences that I've had year after year, certain things that I've just talked about sometimes, and sometimes it's just uncanny. And I can show you something here. It's very bizarre. So we're talking about CERN. So in the summer of 2022, let me see if I can find this really quick. Yeah, here it is. Summer of 2022, they were firing up CERN to a higher degree than they had before. And this was at the same week that the Georgia Guidestones blew up. And it was the same week that Robert Crimo shot up the 4th of July parade. Now, this is just strange to me because I was out on a hike and we have these mountains, these volcanoes on the far west side, these 3 volcanoes. And the way the sun was setting, and I have pictures of this, the volcanoes were projecting shadows that, from my perspective in the foothills, looked like 3 black pyramids on the far side of town. And I thought, this is really strange. I'm going to get up higher and look. So I go up higher on the hill, and I was up there. And at the time, I was talking about the the timing of the CERN, and they were cranking up CERN, and we're seeing these black pyramids. So I go up the hill, and I found somebody had left some items behind. One, a little black pyramid, and then two, this statue of Lord Shiva, who is white because of the ashes of incinerated people or something. I don't know the whole story, but I found this on the trail while I was looking at these black pyramids, and next to it was a little black pyramid thing, some kind of a prayer situation or something somebody was doing. But the timing of it, being with CERN, kind of struck me as unusual. But yeah, I don't think CERN is anything more serious than NASA or SpaceX. It's part of building up the scientific paradigm with the strange occult trappings, the deliberate connections they've made between it and Mandela effect. It's likely significant. What do I think the song Black Hole Sun is really about? Good question. Chris Cornell has a statue there at the EMP. They've renamed it, but the Experience Music Project next to the Space Needle. EMP, like electromagnetic pulse. We've talked about this before. Black Hole Sun. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I'm intrigued by the idea of there being a secondary sun like below us. You've seen these the projection of the land masses of Earth and how they correlate with certain craters on the moon. That's some stuff that's just, I mean, you could say you don't think it means anything, but it's kind of hard to say it's a nothing burger. Even if it's pareidolia, it's the coolest one we've ever seen. By the way, if you're looking at the screen, behind the scenes filming of Harry Potter with the magic of green screen. Now, this is incredible in and of itself. If you've seen the movies, and I've only seen like one of them, I think, but I've noticed these movies, their symbolism, the Phoenix stuff, the release dates, it's all highly occultic. But you're looking here at surround green screens. And what they're doing here is old tech. What they're doing now is what they're going to do when they fake the moon base and the Mars base. Jamarian says, I can tell you it's about the quantum harvesting of worlds. Well, okay, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about CERN. I remember the Gothard rituals where they open it up and you have these goats coming out of a portal, you know, the horned god thing. And I always thought that CERN, because it's all about light. And I thought it might, and of course, with these rituals, I thought it could be some kind of reference to Cernunnos, the horned deity representing the active principle of nature. So you've got Osiris, you've got Moloch, you have all these various ways of representing the god of the earth. The Baphomet ties into this, Pan ties into this, these various horned deities, the horned god of witchcraft, of Wicca. And I think CERN might be a reference to this Cernunnos, this horned god. I mean, on some of these rituals are just a little too over the top. Like, what does this have to do with quantum physics? What does it have to do with light? And ultimately, what I'm saying here is that in the occult, the light is associated with the active principle of nature, the male deity, the horned god, whereas the goddess is darkness, like dark and light, sun and moon. The black hole siphons all light energy. Okay, but getting into this idea of the black hole and taking in light, this ties into this idea of Saturn. And people talk about the Saturn moon matrix and the idea of soul harvesting. Well, there seems to be something to it. If you look at the symbolism of the black cube as it relates to Saturn, time and space control, time control in particular, but it's control over time and space. And this all connects with the symbolism of the hexagram, carbon 666, the number of man, incarnation. And I correlate constantly when you look at how these symbols and numbers play out in movies and in these psyops. The number 33 is consistently connected with the idea of light and ascension, whereas 42 is consistently correlated with gravity, descent, falling, and Saturn. And of course, Saturn, god of matter, and the black cube being a symbol of the material world. So the material world as like a magnet for the light or a trap for souls correlates with the idea of a black hole taking in all the light. But I don't know if it's a literal thing or if it's a way of describing this entity or this process. Some describe as the demiurge or the matrix, this concept of the material realm being something of a soul-sucking, soul-harvesting realm that can entrap you if you forget your celestial origins. And I think that might be true. Like, I have a very Manichaean view about things, and I do happen to think that shape is immaterial to me at this point. The place where we exist is, I guess, something of a meeting ground. You could say spiritual war, but I think there's a war on consciousness. And the object here is to divorce incarnated beings from their place of origin, disconnect them from the light. And I think that the population here is, a lot of people are likely, I'm not going to say soulless, but their souls are essentially negative. Their job here is to cancel out, to negate. And if you look at the track record of humanity at large, I think the facts and the stats kind of bear this out. Jamarian says 33 is interesting because it's an age where a certain amount of consciousness is available to you at that time. Yeah, these numbers have esoteric meaning that is very significant or interesting, and you can find all these different explanations, but the way they've been used consistently, 33 ascension. Even NASA, Mach 33 is the speed you go to exit the material realm. The temperature, at which the ice cube is like liquid, for the frozen state, like the spirit is frozen in this cube in the state. And then at the point where it's liberated, it melts. And this correlates with the idea of Christ dying at 33 and transcending. And these ideas are so prevalent. Vanilla Sky, David Ames, dies at 33, and then he goes into a cryogenic freeze. So he's frozen, and then he goes into a simulation for a long time. And he's awakened by a character played by Penelope Cruz, and her character is named Sophia, which has a great deal of significance in the Gnostic myth, the goddess of wisdom incarnate. And Sophia resurrects him from the ice, and he thaws out to become a real person again. But he dies at 33, he's reborn again 3 days later. I mean, deep esoteric significance to that number and this repeated story of ascension. And in that movie, he is the owner of a magazine. He's a mogul, and the magazine's called Rise. And at the end, when he wakes up and he decides to exit the matrix or exit the simulation, to be de-thawed, to no longer be frozen in ice. Again, this is all symbolic, I think, of the temperature at which the frozen becomes liquid. He starts calling for tech support, and they take him into a tower. And as he's going up the elevator, they explain to him the nature of the simulation. And the background music is Beach Boys' Good Vibrations. So vibrations as he's rising up the tower, and he reaches this revelation that he chose to be divorced from his memory of his past, incarnated into this false realm. And now he's going back into the real world. That's just one layer to that movie. It has other elements, 9/11 stuff, COVID stuff, but a very layered movie. I would recommend it because if you're studying Metascript, because I think it is heavily influenced by Cruise's working with Stanley Kubrick, because it's too layered, too perfect. There's no detail that doesn't build into something or doesn't have a layered meaning to it. And the soundtrack, especially down to the lyrics, all reiterate the same theme. The idea of descended beings into a material realm trying to reawaken to what they really are. In fact, when he goes into the surgery where they fix his face, he's singing What If God Was One of Us, where in the lyrics, the singer is compared to a slug or this fallen being trying to find its way back up. And that's what the whole movie is about. Okay, let's see here. If you want to call in, I put the link below. It's just I don't know if you need an app or you can do it. I think you do it through your browser. It's very easy. and you don't have to have your camera on. Okay, moving on. Here's the twins, just for context. Bridget and Paula Powers. Okay, I'm not sure if the audio is going through on this very clearly. I'm going to play it again here in a second. This is the two twins. I'm going to play it one more time. You have to hear this. And I'm only making a deal about this because twins have been consistently force memed. I would say it's concerted messaging. So this just reiterates this whole theme of twins. Sunshine Coast carjacking chaos.
He was up there without
Now they're wearing white rabbits. I don't know if that means anything. I guess Easter, but
mum, and he went up there and he was coming back down towards us, and he goes, "Run! He's got a gun!" And our heart started to pound, and I said, "Oh, mum, where's mum?" And poor mum was stuck up there.
again, the twins, the Easter reference of the bunnies, and I mentioned before the Pope and his twin, the WEF, stepping down, the twins with the stabbing, the twins in the movie that has multiple parallels with the stabbing psyop. Just pattern recognition. Esteban says, "What a stupid psyop, these twins." Yeah, grind your gears. Yeah, there is no reason for this, is there? That's why I'm pointing it out. And one of the reasons why I'm noticing this is that when we analyze the gestalt, that's what we're doing. For something to be considered programming, it has to be delivered to a mass audience deliberately. It has to be unavoidable. They create an echo chamber effect. And the fact that we're all seeing twins in various ways, where it's unavoidable. I even think the 88 thing, the age of the Pope, the age of Klaus Schwab, both 88 stepping down, there are some correlations between the number 88 and, in fact, the Twin Towers, which I have this great video on the predictive programming in Back to the Future. Like, if you have any doubts that predictive programming exists, like if you're still even doubting the existence of it, well, the evidence is there. The preponderance of evidence supports our claims. You're free to examine that. But you would be very hard pressed to come up with a way to deny the amount of predictive programming in Back to the Future for 9/11. And as it connects to this other movie called The Walk, I mean, it's way too deep, but it has the Twin Pines alluding to the Twin Towers. So this twin thing is just, again, interesting. At this point, I just categorize it as interesting, worth noting. Let's keep it in our mind map. All right, let's see. I'm going through my notes. Activists in DC deface with green. Now, I don't know. This is why I noticed it, I guess. They spray painted with green USA over Trump's plaque in Trump Tower. And I've been talking about the significance of green. Mangione with a green hood, Robin Hood. The green beret on Luigi, the video game character, who's become popularized because of Luigi. And Luigi and Mario are twins, by the way. I just learned that the other day. Then you had the Cybertruck bombing at Trump Tower by a green beret. So you see the pattern here. Joker correlates all of this green hair. And now we have this green defacing. There's also some kind of dialectic here with the Hulks and the Green Hulk, Red Hulk, but this green-red thing, something to pay attention to. Again, Mario, Luigi, twins, green-red. Back to the Future, 9/11 and The Walk, Twin Tower connections from Apophenia Productions. So I like this channel. I like his work. The apophenia is a term that refers to essentially a mentally ill take on all these connections. And that is the tendency, to pathologize these connections. That's called gaslighting. The connections that you see, the perceptions that you're having aren't valid. Trust the TV screen. Rebel Black says The Simpsons predict everything. Yeah, look, you're right, but there's something to watch out for here. The Simpsons has been so has the Family Guy. They've been very well documented as vectors for predictive programming, and that's just because of their popularity. But there's been a trend in the last few years for people to create fake Simpsons predictive programming, and that just seems to be a discrediting operation. Not that Matt Groening isn't all about the Illuminati hand signs and the 33s, it's all there, but yeah, it is a thing. South Park as well. I mean, there's life follows art, there's art being influenced by life, but then there's life is seemingly, repeatedly, predictably imitating movies with uncanny, impossible timing. Because you can't make a movie last year that comes true in the news cycle when it's released. I mean, you can, and it's a coincidence, but when you have hundreds of these coincidences, then it becomes something more than coincidence. Ian Fleming, author of James Bond 007, he said, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action. Well, what is it when it's 100 times, 300 times? When it's systemic fakery, provably. The synchronization between fiction and reality is there. It's all about, I mean, it's really up to us to determine how or why, but the question's been confused by people who say, well, these connections are there, but it's so intricate, man could not have done this. That is a constant refrain I hear in Trutherville. It's like, really? You're going to ascribe to man the power to fake a cosmology, to fake a moon landing, to fake history, to fake dinosaurs, but you draw the line when it comes to using entertainment to provide context for incoming psyops. And I think I just have to explain my position clearer here. And I'm working on a very specific ebook for this. If you're a member, you'll get the ebook, likely as an audiobook. But I have it, it's going to be called PSYOP Entertainment Complex. I have to really lay out what I am saying and dispel any types of straw men, and really introduce the concept of echo chambers, I think, and how they're weaponized, but also, I think also the idea here is that we're looking at influence operations in plain sight and how everything exists within a fictional universe. This is why you see PSYOP actors from January 6th being involved in the present PSYOP. These are closed sets. Now, if you look here, and by the way, it's not just Simpsons, it's widespread, it's everywhere. And it's so pervasive, you can't miss it. And what's more, this has been going on forever. They said Lee Harvey Oswald was inspired by Suddenly and The Manchurian Candidate, 2 Sinatra films. So Frank Sinatra films inspired Lee Harvey Oswald? No. Those films were used to give context for the public to automatically believe the various narratives they were going to be fed with the incoming pre-planned event. Did you know that 2 months before JFK was shot, he and his wife were filming a movie at his house where they simulated his assassination? The Secret Service helped, and they used Heinz 57 for blood. We haven't seen it, but somebody from Vanity Fair has. He shared some shots. He said, hey, look, this shot looks eerily similar to the Zapruder angle of the Ford Lincoln. Like, what a coincidence. Like they were rehearsing. And that just came out last year. All these people talking about the JFK files are missing the fact that JFK simulated his own death 2 months before. Like, I think that's notable. And speaking of closed systems and fictional universes, I went to go see Sinners, and the trailer for Final Destination is very much consistent with what we've been saying. So the Final Destination came out in 2000, and many people said, whoa, it's like 9/11. It starts out with this drastic plane crash. But the story was the character who warns the people to get off the plane has made death mad, created an imbalance. So death hunts down the people who survived the plane crash. So this movie has already been connected with the visual depiction of the horror of dying in a plane crash. And that's what the predictive programming does. It doesn't change reality. They're not causing reality. No, they're providing a context by flooding your imagination and your mind with scenarios. And these are very deliberate, and it's a very consistent thing. So interestingly enough, the new movie Final Destination's Bloodlines, 25 years after the first one, is actually a prequel. Well, rather, it flashes back to before the first one. So the story is this: the real imbalance didn't start in 2000 with the plane crash. No, it started decades before, where the Space Needle was going to be destroyed. So there was a prophet, a girl who had a vision of a disaster at the Space Needle. And she warns everybody to get off the Space Needle. They do, and nothing happens. So, of course, she's been discredited, but she saved all these lives. Well, that deficit had to be corrected. And that's why the Reaper came after the woman's granddaughter at the site of the airplane disaster. But what you have here now is, in this fictional universe, you have a connection between 9/11, as in the visuals there, and the Space Needle. Interestingly enough, and we've been talking about this for several years, there is more imagery in our entertainment collectively for the destruction of the Space Needle than there was for the Twin Towers. So we have been waiting for the destruction of the Space Needle in a 9/11-like event. And this is the result of a lot of, again, hints in the programming. And this has been the subject of JL, Jurassic Liars, who has been talking about this for some time as well. So it's interesting that, according to his analysis, in a little over a month, on June 11th, something's going to happen in Seattle, and the Space Needle is a huge part of this event. Now, I watched the trailer again, and the person says, I saw what death was about to do, and she's looking up at the Space Needle. And I thought, wait a minute here. This movie comes out next month, like less than a month before it's supposed to happen. Well, where have we seen this before? Well, leading up to 9/11, you had the X-Files spin-off show, The Lone Gunman, with the Twin Towers being targeted by a plane. You had Collateral Damage. You had so many movies that were leading up to 9/11 that prepared us for it. So this is happening in the run-up to 6/11. I think it's just noteworthy. And also, again, the fact that it's connecting 9/11 to Seattle, very intriguing connection here. Rebel Black says, Mud Flood 2, it's a cool story, but I think it's another rabbit hole. Yeah, I think that's one of those things where it's looking in the right direction, but it's probably a lot of misinformation. I like certain aspects of it. I like the people who suddenly start appreciating architecture, and their minds are blown. It's like, no way somebody could carve a statue like that today. Well, no, this is actually what artists do. A lot of them run around with this idea that they can't understand how it works, therefore it must be some high-tech stuff. They 3D printed these cathedrals. That's the divine fallacy. That's the assumption that higher powers must have done this. That kind of reasoning, which is flawed. But I don't dispute necessarily that a mud flood has happened, but I think it was mental. Like the idea of a reset where they somehow wipe everything out and start from scratch. And we've been told this is going to happen symbolically, and it ties into the Space Needle. It all ties into the concept of the Tower of Babel, America as the Tower of Babel. This all connects. One World Trade Tower, 1776 feet high, 1776 is code, not just for the building of America, but the building of the Tower of Babel by Nimrod. And this goes back to the Masonic calendar, which is 4,000 years added to ours. And if you go to 1776 AL, Year of Light, that's when Nimrod begins its construction. So if you follow the idea of Manly P. Hall's The Secret Destiny of America, the symbol of the phoenix is built into it. The eagle, the American eagle, is really a phoenix. And it represents destruction, purposeful destruction at some point. It's going to self-immolate and build something better in the ashes. But the Tower of Babel falling is a huge part of this story. And the Space Needle in this story symbolically may just represent that. Does it reach the heavens? Well, yeah. The top of the Space Needle is a UFO. It's designed to be a UFO. The 42-second elevator ride to the top of the Space Needle in Seattle, that's the tractor beam. The UFO is 42 meters wide, but it was designed to be a UFO, which again represents the ones who descend from above or your ascension. So it is something of a modern concept of the tower that reaches the heavens. But again, all these towers tie into the central idea of this one system, this monolithic system, and it being pulled. And this ties in again to 9/11, which is a build up to it. But I think we might be looking, also interestingly enough, the date, would it be 6/11 if that happens? I've been looking at that date and that number for a long time because of its connection consistently with the white nationalist thing. And I've been saying that there seems to be some indication that the white nationalists are going to get their hands on a nuke with the help of Russia, and they're going to take out Seattle. That's been kind of one of the subtexts that I picked up on. And so the 6/11 correlation with the white nationalists, like this white OBL, even connects to Timothy McVeigh, executed 6/11, 2001, 90 days before 9/11, when Muhammad Atta crashed into the tower, another 33-year-old there too. By the way, Trump was shot at 6:11 p.m. in 33 seconds. Rebel Black says, Tim, Nipsey is still getting attention. The narratives didn't die with him. I'm going to have to look into that. I'll have to revisit the whole Nipsey Hussle thing. He was supposed to build something at the Marathon store. I don't know if they followed through with it. But for those who don't know, that was one of these fascinating psyops. He died on 3/31, which was the anniversary of Brandon Lee, by the way, his fake death, which mirrored his father's death. Again, Bruce Lee dies in a film where he gets shot during the filming of a movie, and then his son dies because like the rust accident, takes him out. Fascinating, and it's likely faked. We've gone down that trail a few times. But the Nipsey Hussle thing happened on 3/31. Before that, he was in a video with Roddy Ricch, Die Young. And they have this thing, it's called the Die Young curse. All these rappers that have some kind of mysterious death connected to that song. And in the video Die Young, Nipsey Hussle the singer Roddy Ricch is in a graveyard, and he's looking at his phone, and there's Nipsey Hussle on his phone. The timestamp is 133. And of course, 3/31 is when he dies young. That was a very interesting Holy Week. Like I said last week, it was lit. You had the Cathedral Fire, Notre Dame, which has a lot of stuff with that one. You had the crown of thorns that Jesus wore was going to burn, and there was a 66-minute window for it to be saved, and a fireman ran in and saved it. And it was a fireman who had also been one of the first responders at the Bataclan fake shooting with the Eagles of Death Metal. And he had been involved in something in Kuwait. So this PSYOP actor saves the crown of thorns. Interesting story. They also had a sighting of a Knight Templar in the tower as it was burning. And on the roof of Notre Dame, they saw that the 3 bee habitats, each containing 60,000 bees, 60, 60, 60, survived the fire. And the 60, 60, 60, the rolling 60s, it all connects to Nipsey. It connects to the symbol of the hexagon and the Knights Templar, their symbol originally being the beehive. And the idea of the Notre Dame burning and then being built back, it's all symbolic. And then the steeple, when it was burning and as it was falling, YouTube misidentified it in the notes as 9/11. But there were some interesting connections between that fire, the Templars, and the story of the Templars being burned at the stake, and the idea of the Phoenix cycle. In fact, Nipsey Hussle's mother said something about our engine is burning but not destroyed. There were all these really ominous statements that were just thrown out there during that week. And that was at the same time, we're talking about 2019, that May, where a 33-year-old wearing a USA shirt set himself on fire in front of the obelisk there in DC, the Washington Monument. He was there on the ellipse. And 33 years prior, during the Reagan administration, another individual did the same exact thing. There's a pattern here that we were picking up on with 33s, the Burning Man. Dave Koresh was 33. Again, McVeigh, 33 executed. What is this? And I think there might be something to, okay, the Templars were disbanded on 322, which is a very significant date to the Skull and Bones, who are said to be a Templar organization. You know, Crowley, we talk about Aleister Crowley, the New Age movement. That's the OTO, the Order Templar Orientis. But they were supposedly disbanded 322, 1312. And throughout the riots of 2020, you keep seeing 1312 spray painted on everything. And the news media is reporting on the riots, the peaceful protests, and they leave the 1312s there. Well, it's not 1312s, it's ACAB, is what I mean. Or 1312. See, these are references to the phrase, all cops are bastards. But I thought, what if it's really a reference to who's behind the scenes controlling stuff? You know, Templars, the secret society networks. Challenger Hoax says, you know about the Operation Mindfuck, the use of 23? Okay, I don't know, but I'd like to know, because I was talking about Final Destination, and Final Destination has all kinds of synchronicities encoded into it that the characters have with the number 23. Like 23 miles to the exit, something exit 23 where the big event happens. Challenger Hoax says, Robert Anton Wilson, the guy that wrote the Myths of the Illuminati trilogy. Yeah, he wrote the book called Coincidence about the number 23, and he wrote The Cosmic Trigger. And he correlates the number 23 with the Dog Star. And he says the Dog Star is sending, and he was friends with Timothy Leary, and they had this concept of the starseed transmissions, that the idea that Sirius is beaming messages down to those who can receive it, that somehow get them to achieve some enlightened state, that we are being upgraded. Like, you know, you download your new version of your iPhone. Well, we're getting our new download from Sirius, according to Robert Anton Wilson. So I'm reading his book, The Cosmic Trigger, because he says Sirius is the cosmic trigger. And then I go see and this was right after Robert Anton Wilson died, because he died on January 11th of the year that Truman Show came out. Because I was in the theater watching the Truman Show, and I had Robert Anton Wilson's Cosmic Trigger. So when I'm watching the Truman Show, I'm like, wait a minute here. He wakes up from the movie because the Dog Star fell from the sky, the satellite that represents the Dog Star. And that triggered his awakening. So I'm like, wait a minute, there's a connection here, because his other movie that came out following this was called The Number 23, about somebody going mad reading a book about some guy who had a ton of synchronicities with the number 23. Well, guess what book that was? That book, The Number 23, Jim Carrey movie, had to have alluded to Robert Anton Wilson's book, Cosmic Trigger. And at the end of the movie, Jim Carrey's character is trying to figure out who wrote the book. So he sends 23 packages to the mailbox of the author, and he goes to meet the guy. And the guy who picks up the packages happens to look like Robert Anton Wilson. I thought that's kind of weird, because again, Wilson had just died. And he says, what does 23 mean? He's trying to get an answer out of him, and the character takes out a knife and cuts his own throat. Well, the subtitle of The Cosmic Trigger is Final Secret of the Illuminati. And if you read the blood oaths, you know, in these secret society groups, the oath is if you spill the secrets, you get your throat cut. But anyway, it was the Jim Carrey movie, The Number 23, and The Truman Show that got me to look closer at movies. That's when I started to say, wait a minute here. Why is there a level of meaning in these movies that couldn't possibly be targeting the ticket buyers? At first I thought, okay, these are Easter eggs for nerds. But then I looked closer and I thought, wait, Jim Carrey's characters in various movies are alluding to the Dog Star in different ways. And then you look at his role on the world stage and how he is known for his New Ageism. He even has this great breakdown of the number 23. It gets to be pretty clear. And this is when I coined a phrase, Hollywood archetype casting. because you got typecasting. You pick this guy because he fits a certain type of archetype. But what if they're a typecast? But what if their archetype has a deeper meaning? So Jim Carrey is very much like a fool in the Truman Show. And if you look at the meaning of the Fool card, it's somebody beginning the journey into enlightenment by recognizing that he doesn't know anything. But again, I started to recognize there's some esoteric element in the movies. And following that, I think that's kind of what's, anyway, is that movie. That was why it's kind of interesting to me too, that the cosmic trigger was in my hands when I see somebody and I recognize Sirius. I see somebody in the movie awakening because of Sirius, to the fact that he's living in a movie. And what are we talking about every day? We're talking about our movie, our fiction, our propaganda enhanced consensus worldview, our collective Truman Show. Okay, Challenger Hook says 23 is the number of the Temple of Psychic Youth. Right. And the Discordian Society, they worship the goddess Eris, the goddess of chaos, and they ascribe the number 23 to her as well. So the 23 connects to chaos, the dog star, and I'll have to look back into, I have a book over here. In fact, you mentioned the Illuminatus trilogy. I have book 2 over here, Robert Anton Wilson. He has some interesting work that might be worth examining in the context of what we're doing, because he came up with this concept he called reality tunnels, and how people get locked into a subjective reality tunnel by cognitive bias. And he said, do an experiment, because he was all about recognizing this idea that we convince ourselves of things. He says, what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. And he said, if you want to see if you're being followed, for example, just tell yourself, yeah, I'm being spied on by the government, and I'm going to write down evidence of this happening over the next week. And he said, over the next week, now, if you see somebody working on a power line, you're going to notice this. You might see somebody walking by, they look at you, you're going to notice this. The idea was that if you set your cognitive bias that this is true, you have this presupposition, I'm being followed, you could justify it. Your mind will locate information that could support that. So his books delve into synchronicity, coincidence, but also where we can let our beliefs take us out of objective reality, the power of beliefs to distort our perceptions. Portal Complex says, Angels and Demons fired me off, highly recommended. Dan Brown, Angels and Demons. Dan Brown wrote Inferno, the movie. Inferno is about a super virus that shuts down the world. The movie's Tom Hanks opens up where he's locked down in a hospital. He wakes up in a hospital in Italy. But in real life, Tom Hanks, when COVID came out, was locked down in Australia. But meanwhile, Italy had been like the first place to lock down. But the super virus was called, I think it was called Inferno or something. But anyway, Dan Brown movies, Tom Hanks, very interesting links there. And that was a pretty good one. I remember reading it one. It was about the Vatican. In fact, we're talking about the Vatican. And I think it had to do with the idea that Christ was married. And at that time, it was controversial. Okay, we've covered up quite a lot here. There's going to be more tomorrow. Tomorrow is Infinite Plane Saturn Day. So I'm not here making predictions. We're just spotting the trends. But if I wanted to make a prediction, I would say keep our eyes on a sudden, unexpected exit of Laura Loomer from the world stage, and Seattle, the Space Needle in particular, having some kind of a disaster. And that's scheduled for 6/11. So mark your calendars accordingly. Thanks for the comments. We had a great caller tonight. That was from the Challenger Hoax channel. I'll make sure I get that link. Again, Challenger Hoax on YouTube. I'll watch his videos. I'll comment on them tomorrow for Infinite Plane Saturn Day. So have a great evening. This is Chief Crow.
Hoax, stay.